The time is 7 o'clock, and we'll call to order the meeting for March the 9th, 2020. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Here.
Mrs. Keller? Here. Mr. Hoffman?
Here.
Mr. Farrell?
Here.
Mr. Hellinger?
Here.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Here.
Mayor Riggle?
Here. Tonight's invocation will be led by Pastor Bill Brenner of the Church of Christ of Christian Union. If you'll all please rise.
Father, we thank you for the blessing of this day and for all the rich things that you have done for each person that's gathered here this evening. Lord, we pray for your insight, for your wisdom, your discernment in each of the items of business that will be presented here this evening. And Father, I ask that you would give understanding and wisdom to those who are considering each of these items. Father, may they be presented with integrity. And ultimately, may the decisions be made that honor you and benefit this community. We pray and ask in the name of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Item 4 is the approval of the motion summary of the regular meetings and joint meetings. You'll read the rest of your lane. My computer just died.
Approval of the motion summary of the regular meeting of council held on February 24th, 2020 is recorded and transcribed.
Move for approval.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Schaefer, second by Mr. Jones. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Farrell?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes, motion carries. Item 5 is the consent agenda. If you'll please take a deep breath and start reading, girl.
Item A, acceptance of the motion summary of the Shade Tree Commission meeting held on October 22nd, 2019 as recorded and transcribed. Item B, acceptance of the motion summary of the Historic Preservation Commission meeting held on October 23rd, 2019 as recorded and transcribed. Item C, acceptance of the motion summary of the Planning Commission meeting held on February 5th, 2020 as recorded and transcribed. Item D, resolution number 20-23, a resolution authorizing the extension of the school zone for Conger Elementary School to 300 feet east of the easternmost school property line on East William Street, US 36 for westbound traffic. Item E, resolution number 20-24, a resolution authorizing the City of Delaware to participate in the State of Ohio Cooperative Purchasing Program. And item F, established March 23rd, 2020 at 7:30 p.m. as a date and time for a public hearing and second readings for ordinance number 20-10, an ordinance approving a rezoning amendment for Terra Alta LLC for Terra Alta subdivision from A1 and R2 PMU to A1 and R2 PMU on approximately 472.9 acres and located north of Bromiller Road, east of Pollock Road, and west of Berlin Station Road. No zoning changes to the Stockdale Farms portion of the development. And for ordinance number 20-11, an ordinance approving a conditional use permit for Terra Alta LLC, allowing the placement of a planned mixed-use overlay district for Terra Alta subdivision on approximately 472.9 acres zoned A1 and R2 PMU and located north of Bromiller Road, east of Pollock Road, and west of Berlin Station Road.
You really can breathe in between those, you know.
It's better to go through.
Thank you.
I move to amend item C to record the correct date of February 5th, 2020.
Second.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Schaefer, second by Ms. Keller. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Farrell?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
Move for approval of the consent agenda as amended.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Schaefer, second by Ms. Keller. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Farrell?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes, thank you. Item 6 is time set aside for letters, petitions, or public comments for anything that is not on tonight's agenda. Is there anyone in the public that would like to come forward at this time? Come forward to the microphone and give us your name and address for the record, please.
Travis Irvin, 1 West Winter Street. I'm a program manager at the Delaware General Health District. So Madam Mayor, members of council, just want to do a quick update on coronavirus that's going around. I know that our health commissioner, Sheila Hiddleston, is meeting tomorrow with a lot of your directors from the city. She just met with the superintendents as well, so I'm not going to get too detailed unless you have specific questions, and I'll try and get into it. But you all know coronavirus started a couple months ago, started over in the Hubei province in China. And fun fact is Hubei province is actually Ohio's sister state. So that started in like 1979, so there's a lot of communication between Ohio and Hubei province. As of today, there were 105,000 cases of COVID-19 worldwide. 80,000 of those are from China, and 423 of those are from the U.S. You might know coronavirus is kind of a more common virus. This one is a novel form of it. Past coronaviruses have included SARS in 2003 and MERS, which was first discovered in 2012. SARS has kind of gone away since 2003. MERS, even as late as last year, there were still cases being found in the Arabian Peninsula. So it's still going on, but it's nowhere near what it was in 2012 when it was first discovered. SARS has about a 9.6% fatality rate. MERS was 34%, and this current virus is about 3.4% right now. So a lot less fatal than the ones previously. There's a score they calculate called R-naught, which kind of describes how infectious a virus is. This current virus right now is estimated at 2.2. So for every person who has COVID-19, they expect about 2.2 cases to spread and get it elsewhere. SARS was between 2 and 5 for an R-naught, and measles is the highest one between 12 and 18. So this one's pretty much on par with what we see in influenza, acting like influenza. It just has a little bit higher mortality rate like we would see for a bad flu season. In the fall, I gave you guys a community profile on the city of Delaware, if you recall, and one of the indexes on here is the Social Vulnerability Index, and we're really looking at these right now. The Social Vulnerability Index is a score the CDC calculates, looks at a lot of things, socioeconomic factors, household composition, disability, minority language, housing, transportation. It's a score that really says this particular census tract could be more vulnerable to something such as a COVID-19. I just want to mention to you that census tract 105.3, which would be south of Oak Grove Cemetery, north of 42, east of Liberty Road, and west of Delaware Christian, which I believe would be Councilman Huffman's district area. Yep. That does have the highest social vulnerability index in the city. It's a score between 0 and 1, and this particular census tract has a score of 0.9033, which is kind of high, so that would be one of the main populations that we want to look out for that could be really impacted by a novel virus such as this. The health district has been very busy with coronavirus. We've been giving information to our schools, EMA, EMS, universities, our medical providers. And at the end of the day today, you might have heard Ohio had the first cases that we've had so far. We had 3 cases, all of them in Cuyahoga County. My understanding is 2 of them were on a Nile River cruise. One of them was in Washington, D.C. People who are coming back from China, we are talking to them. They are going in a volunteer quarantine for 14 days when they get back. Right now, it's only people coming back from China who fall into this. We are not being notified about travelers who are coming back from Italy, Iran, Japan, and South Korea. Even though those countries do have level 2 and 3 travel warnings from the U.S. government because of coronavirus, because China has the massive volume of 80,000 cases, they're really the only ones that we are doing follow-up for. Direct active monitoring is what we call it. And we are updating our website pretty frequently. We have a special section for coronavirus, so I would recommend if you have any questions to go there, check that out. It's updated very frequently. And other than that, I know you have a busy agenda. I don't want to take too much of your time. Any questions I can answer before you see Ms. Hiddleston tomorrow?
I had one. I was speaking with our city manager earlier today about this, and just regarding just city protocol in terms of having, I was thinking just for this meeting tonight, all of city council, our city manager, assistant city manager, normally we have our safety force chiefs here, the head of our water plant, the head of our roads, and just having all of us sort of in the same place at the same time so that if there was some exposure, which doesn't seem out of the realm of possibilities, of course, a very slight chance, but not out of the realm of possibilities, should we consider perhaps doing some remote viewing for our staff members so that not all of them are in the same room at the same time or in the same, gathered together so that.
One of the recommendations is to consider for businesses that telecommuting is a possibility, to try and have people telecommuting, to try and limit any possible exposures. So social distancing is being recommended. Not every agency or business has the ability to telecommute, but if it is possible, it is one of the recommendations out there right now to try and telecommute as much as possible.
Okay, we have to be here for now, but, and then just looking into if there was a situation where council would get quarantined, I think we have to look at that ourselves. Can we conduct a meeting remotely if it should come to that? And of course, remote possibility again, but not out of the realm of possibilities. But for directors, if we had a question, we could always reach them via telephone and they could be sitting on their couches watching on YouTube.
We could do it through Zoom. There's plenty of
Sure.
technology, so
Yes.
that'll be something we'll be talking about tomorrow, I think, in terms of our staff. We do have a continuity of operations plan that calls out for these types of things, but I
That
can,
was my question to Tom today, if something happens
Yeah.
to our police department, our EMS, or our fire, or, or our water department, what would we do? How would we still continue to run and take care of it? I didn't take lunch until 3 o'clock today, so I watched Dr. Oz, all about the virus, and about how important it is to wash your hands, and I got a whole lecture on how to do this, and don't forget your thumbs and all that. But it was really interesting about how you leave, and you're never supposed to take that piece of paper to open that door always. We need a trash can outside the bathrooms, so people start using it to keep us all clean and safer. And we are all sitting way too close to each other. During this virus, we're all supposed to have space. So I don't know what to do about that, but it was interesting.
Yeah, and just remember, influenza is still the primary threat in Ohio, so I really wish all this heightened sense of hand washing and awareness was every year
Every
for
day.
flu season.
We could get people in the habit, and then it would just continue.
Correct, yes. Okay.
Thank you so much. Anyone else in the audience would like to come forward at this time?
He's a little taller than I am. Hello, good evening. Couple things.
Wait, name and address.
I'm sorry, Michael Rush, 778 Canal Street, here in Delaware. Last Thursday, I was called 3 times by the Social Security Administration, wanting me to call them back. I'm sure it's a scam. I made the police department know about it. None of my friends have also been approached by the same phone numbers. Unfortunately, they are all in their 70s and 80s. I'm not sure if 51 counts me as old, and they're trying to take advantage of the age. But just want to make everybody aware that this is going around. Social Security Administration will not call you. So, and then second of all, not taking anything away from the coronavirus, because that's been a main focus. But not too many people realize that March is MS Awareness Month. And I just want to make some people aware of MS and some of the facts I've drawn up. There's fewer than 200,000 people per year diagnosed with MS. The cause is still unknown, but there's a combination of environmental and genetic factors that scientists are looking at. The closer you live to the equator, the ratio of MS-related diagnosis in population is narrow. So people up here can get it sooner than people who live down in Florida or where it's warm all the time. Right now in the U.S., there's nearly 1.5 million people diagnosed with MS. And almost 80% of those diagnosed are, the first sign is ocular neuritis, which is, you kind of go kind of blind in one eye. It's usually your weaker eye, so if you're left eye dominant, your right eye gets it. If you're right eye dominant, your left eye gets it. The class of 1986, Delaware Hayes, there's been 6 people in that class. The class was 350 some odd graduates in that class. 6 of those people were diagnosed with MS. I'm one of those. That's why it's very important to me. And I was one of those 80% that was diagnosed because I had ocular neuritis. Only because I couldn't hit a golf ball one day and found it kind of odd, and I covered up my eye trying to wipe the sweat off my brow, and oh wow, all of a sudden I can't see. Which kind of would have helped me in my golf game, but just want to make everybody aware that MS is an issue. Not taking anything away from the coronavirus. That's been a topic of many conversations in the past couple of months, but March is MS Awareness Month, and just want to make that known.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Oh, for additional facts, please, MS, National MS Society on the web has all sorts of information, so. And the Buckeye chapter is one you want to look at.
Okay. Thank you very much. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to come forward at this time? Okay, we'll move on to committee reports. Mr. Jones?
We have no report, but there is a Park and Rec meeting next Thursday at 7 o'clock.
Thank you. Mrs. Gallup?
HPC met on February 26th. One of the cases on the agenda was examining plans for a hotel. Those plans will be coming to council with HPC's recommendations. And I think that's it. Other things are still being, some concept reviews and things like that, but other things will come to our agenda.
Thank you.
Nothing to report. The Board of Zoning Appeals meeting for Wednesday has been canceled for lack of agenda items. Other than that, I've been invited to speak on a panel on environmental sustainability at Ohio Wesleyan on March 24th, so I'll be participating in that.
Wonderful. Mr. Farrell?
I have one for one.
You have one, yay!
So the Shade Tree Commission met, I'm blanking on when it was, a week or 2 ago. And they have a number of events coming up for Earth Day, the Now Festival, and Arbor Day, different tree planting things. And they will also have an annual report coming in front of council pretty soon.
Very good, thank you. Mr. Hollinger?
Nothing to report.
Mr. Schaefer?
Mr. Holman and I will be attending the monthly MORPC meetings Thursday.
Okay. And I did go to the mayors and managers meeting on Friday, and it was a very good meeting, very tentative. We were at the White Castle headquarters, so lunch was awesome. I had a lot of things to bring back to Tom today, so. Okay, with that, we'll move on to item 8, which is the 7th reading of ordinance number 19-63. And if you'll please read this into the record.
Ordinance number 19-63, an ordinance accepting the annexation of 43.847 plus or minus acres of land, more or less, description and map are attached here to as Exhibits A and B for the annexation known as the Evans Farm Delaware LLC annexation by Andrew Wecker, agent for the petitioners.
Thank you. Mr. Holman?
So since our last meeting, when we discussed this, I want to provide some additional information. Actually, what Dave is going to put up on the screen, hopefully here in a minute, is a copy of a map that I put at your place this evening, which actually Dave referenced in his update dated February 24th. And when Dave talked about the utility planning area for the city, this actually, this map is an appendix to an agreement that we reached with the county back in the early 2000s. Actually, there were 2 agreements we reached. One was with Delaware County with respect to sanitary sewer service. The other one was with the Delco Water Company with respect to water services. And I put this in front of you just to illustrate kind of graphically the area that we're talking about, the area in question, which Dave can just point out here, is really the southeast corner of the city. That is, at the time, the Gurdon annexation hadn't occurred, but the Stavroff annexation had. That's the Belmont Place area. So this is obviously the southern limit of the city's utility boundary area. So, you know, the number of council members I've been talking to about this issue have asked about just the, you know, what if we don't, what if we do, what are the trade-offs? I mean, good planning, putting aside, I guess, I'd start by saying, put aside the NCA issue. That complicates this somewhat. But I think even given the NCA issue and the complications of that, I still think that it's warranted to accept the annexation because of the planning that we have done that kind of tries to, as best we can, adhere to our comprehensive plan. And the comprehensive plan, in part, is driven by the utility service boundary areas, how far the city can serve, and what are the boundaries. And we've done a pretty good job of trying to adhere to those. If we don't accept the annexation, the agreement that we have with the county says that we have to work something out. It really doesn't say what, but the county would have to either provide the service, which would be problematic because of where they are in proximity to this, and Blake Jordan can go into more detail on that, or we would have to provide it without requiring the annexation, which is really contrary to our code of ordinances. So, you know, this is an area where I think it's sensible. It comports with our comprehensive plan in terms of the growth areas. If the bigger question is annexation, the cost of annexation, the cost of growth, that discussion really should be occurring, should be occurring now and should be occurring with respect to that area north of Berlin Station Road. There's close to 2,000 acres up there. That is, you know, if there's a question about, you know, how far we grow and what the boundaries are, obviously that's within our sewer service boundaries. But that's a far more consequential policy discussion for city council to have, as opposed to the 43 acres of property that really just squares off the corner, the southeast corner of the city. Can the city move ahead if it doesn't annex? Yes, but it's just one of those, it will just be an anomaly from the standpoint of, oh, why is that not in the city? It's in our growth boundaries. So that's, you know, I guess my pitch, that to be consistent with our comprehensive plan, which talks about annexation, it talks about this area being annexed into the city. I think it's consistent with that. The NCA issue makes it a little more problematic, and I get that. But we have, I think, worked out an arrangement with the developer that's fair. Is it perfect? No. And I stipulate at the very outset that it's imperfect, but it's, I think, better than what we had started with. And I think there are some variables in there that I provided in my write-up earlier regarding our projection of when that millage, that 7.5 mils, has to be probably at some point rolled back. Because what we don't want to do is end up with a balance of excess NCA revenues and our debt's already paid for. So at some point, as Finance Director Navi put in his information in the fact sheet, we're going to have to make an adjustment to that. When that occurs, I'm not sure, but it's going to be in probably the next year or two. We're going to have to go to the NCA board and talk about that. So that's another, I guess, factor to consider. So I think that it's fair. The other thing, and this is a follow-up to a question that Vice Mayor Schaefer had when I was on the phone with him this morning, was the income tax yield in that area. And I'm going to have our Alicia Ballone just come to the table there and just kind of review with you. We did kind of, not a back-of-the-napkin analysis, but we actually did a little bit of an analysis of what the income generation is down in that area. The hard part right now is to determine what that cost side of things is. In the short term, there's less cost in this part of the city than there are others, just because the infrastructure is newer, there's fewer runs, in terms of police runs, in terms of fire EMS runs, things like that, and a lot of the growth that has allowed that to occur has been financed through the new community authority charges impact fees and things like that, but I at least wanted to give you an idea of what it generates, and so I'll let Alicia just kind of review that.
Sure. So the typical household in that area is bringing, in 2018, had an income size of about $99,700, which is significantly above where the average household size is for Delaware. So in 18, a similar size development in that area would have brought in about $177,000. So that would be annually the kind of income tax that you can expect to see.
Is that before or after the 50%?
This is what was actually owed the city.
So that didn't answer my question.
Yes, so this is what would have been collected in payment to the city. So it should have included anything that, any credits.
Net of the 50% rebate.
It should be, yes.
Anyway, I just wanted to, the question was asked, what does that tax yield look like in that part of the city? That's one of the areas where incomes tend to be higher, and that's kind of borne out, and we found. But again, it's our recommendation that you approve it, although I respect some of the concerns that have been raised regarding not taking it in the NCA issue. So, I don't know, Dave, did you want to elaborate at all? I know you had.
No, I just support your remarks, Tom, and maybe just show you, I don't have it up, I'm sorry, but the utility boundary in this issue, in this part of our community, matches our long-term planning boundary. That is Peachboro Road and the tracks, basically, in this quadrant. Not only for our current comprehensive plan, but the one that we've been working on for the last year and a half. We've been focusing inside the utility boundary for growth. Some of that would be maybe infill in the riverfront district and a near south area district, but also in the southeast area and the southwest area, where we've talked about maybe some mixture of uses in both of those places. So hasn't ever gone outside of that utility boundary, and to some extent in the new plan we've been talking about not focusing on the boundary towards the kind of the north of the city, so that we can again focus our attention, our resources into these kind of 5 special areas that I think council is aware of that are emerging through the new plan that we've heard from about 2,000 citizen comments so far in support of that general approach.
Madam Mayor, member of council, if I may interrupt to interject that I put the note in your fact sheet, but we did add a line that was requested at the last meeting that says if this property was removed from the Evans Farm, NCA would be required to join the city's NCA. So I usually don't make changes between meetings, but that was indicated that council wanted that last time. So that is in the language that you would be passing tonight if you voted for this.
Thank you. Questions for staff?
I have a question back with regards to the financial. So you said just shy of 100,000 annual income
That's correct.
household,
Yes.
60 houses, building that.
I think the sample we did was for 96 homes, George. We did it for Belmont Place.
Well, but we're not talking about Belmont.
No, I know,
We're talking about
Right.
this, so let's not muddy the water. 60 homes? So 60 times.
Wait, just time out, I'm sorry. The question was.
Okay, so you're trying to justify this annexation.
No, the question was asked just.
No. What you're trying to do is justify this annexation through income. And if you say you got 100,000 per house, how many houses in this area to be built? I thought it was 60.
100 and over the course of the development? So
45 acres.
109.
Okay, so if you have 109 times 1,850, what is that? Who has a calculator? I can't do that in my head.
109 times what?
109 times
Just over 200,000.
1,850. What's that?
It'll be 200,000, 201,650.
Okay, so then take half of that. So you got 100,000. Because the majority of those people are going to work out of the city, and we're going to give them 50% of their money back. I mean, could be more than 50%, seeing how they're on the south end of the city. So I don't know where you come up with 177,000, but I understand if you're using Belmont Place, but that muddies the water because we're not talking about Belmont.
Right. That was the only way we could, we're looking at the closest development and,
Okay.
yeah.
Yes,
All right,
and
I got you.
just to clarify, the 177,000 is what was collected in taxes in 2018 from
Okay.
that area.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Thank you.
Mhm.
So what is, may I?
Absolutely.
Okay, so what is the legality on us changing our NCA? I thought that was kind of a quasi-political entity in that once we pass legislation saying that NCA charges were this for this duration or for this amount of money, what is the legality of, which is what we're doing?
Are you
Right.
talking about the boundaries or the?
No, I'm talking
the
about,
dollar amount?
I'm talking about a negotiated, reduced NCA charge to the developer.
This property is not in the NCA yet, so when the NCA is created, it's created with a geographical boundary. We have a map of properties that we would anticipate requiring to join the NCA, which was the position that this property was in. However, this property has never been in and would not be in the NCA because it's in a different NCA. That's why we had to negotiate the separate payment, because they can't be in both. So it's never been in.
Right. However, if their NCA didn't exist, they would be.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, yes, that's correct, George. And that's the,
So I guess then, and just, and I'll put this to bed, why do we want to subsidize a developer for, why don't they pay the full 7.5 to us, make us whole? He can take it on the chin, on his 10 mil NCA. Why is it dependent? You know, if we were courting this development and we really wanted to be in and it was going to do all these wonderful things for us, then I could say, sure, okay, now we're going to negotiate. But it's unfair to everyone in that existing area, which is paying 7.5 mil NCA. And it just doesn't, I mean, why? If it's really important that he wants to be in, he can take and reduce his internal NCA charges and make us whole.
I'd like to just respond to that last part. I don't think it's unfair to the people that are in that NCA. Now, they bought a home understanding that they were going to be paying a 7.5 mil charge on that home. So I don't think we're doing anything unfair to them. We just, the people moving into the Evans Farm, they know they're going to be paying a 10 mil NCA. I don't think we're being unfair to anybody. I mean, they knew when they bought the house what the millage was going to be.
I guess that's a different way of looking at it, because everyone down in that area is paying that NCA for Glen Road. Except for those guys. They're not paying.
Are we all okay with the 10.5 mil NCA?
it's 10. I
10,
mean,
okay, are we
yes,
all,
Well,
I mean,
that's another
because
question.
if we annex, then we'll have a 10 mil NCA, our citizens will be paying. And so then I would assume that if we accept those terms, then we're all okay with a 10 mil NCA for our citizens.
That's what we've talked about all along.
So then, but why did we pass a resolution in, it was not that long ago, in October 28th of 2019, that established guidelines for NCAs? Now, I know that that would be a new NCA, but essentially, we pass those guidelines because it says, whereas the charge appears on the resident's property tax bill, which can impact the resident's view of their city tax burden and lead to calls to the city of asking about the charge. So we established some guidelines, and those guidelines said that the city will not approve developer-initiated NCAs in areas where the city NCA is contemplated, unless that NCA addresses the city's infrastructure needs, which this one doesn't. We also said that the city prefers NCA millage to be 5 mils or less. If a millage above this is proposed, extraordinary circumstances and supporting reasoning shall be documented. In these cases, so if there is extraordinary circumstances, the city may approve millage up to 7.5. So this is way over those guidelines. And then it says in order to even consider this, it has to be 100 total gross acres. So we just passed these in October of 2019, and I didn't even think of this until 5 o'clock today. Why did we do this if we philosophically don't want citizens in our city to be paying millage above 7.5? So this kind of violates it's not meeting any of the established guidelines that we have. I personally don't think that an NCA should be a negotiable thing, kind of like taxes. It exists. If you want to come into the city in an area where we have an NCA, then you have to agree to pay what that NCA charge will be for that area. And I don't know how we justify to other residents why it's okay to negotiate it in one place, but then nowhere else. And I fear then that if we do that, we're opening up the possibility of other developers asking us to negotiate future NCAs and say, well, why does Evans Farm, why are they allowed to have a 10 mil NCA, but you're limiting me at 7.5? And then they bring out our guidelines and say, well, these obviously aren't being followed because you did it for them. So it kind of throws away everything that we have and a lot of work that we've done regarding this.
So out of curiosity, see developers here, if you don't mind, what made you want to join, like the small section of your development, why do you want that to be in the city versus a larger, keeping it consistent throughout?
I meant to get some hand sanitizer. Good evening, I'm Tony Ironman with Evans Farm, 1550 Lewis Center Road. Kind of starting at the very beginning, the Evans Farm NCA has been planned and in the works as far as adoption since probably about 2014. It's something that the family and we have worked on together. County's been involved. Certainly the city's been made aware of it, very informally. I believe the NCA came into effect in 2018. Don't hold me to those dates, but it's about right. Family, we worked with the family in a lot of different instances as far as developing Evans Farm. One thing we've considered with the family, and the family has been involved all the way through this, let me take a half step back. The family had no say and was not even aware that this was in a service agreement between the city and the county. So this was a surprise to them when we started looking at this. Now, jumping back into it, when we started looking at this piece of property, Mr. Gurdon's property was in the process of being annexed and zoned, and we started looking at it as well. By that point, the NCA was already in place. The Evans Farm NCA was already in place. And with the family's approval and insistence, the entire thing was included in the NCA. Legally, because it's all the NCA taxes, if you will, have been pledged for the payment of bonds for Evans Farm. When we started talking with Tom, with Darren, we were kind of given an estimate that the NCA would be, the city's NCA would be in existence for an approximate period of somewhere around 4 years. That was just a very brief discussion. It was an estimate. There was no understanding that it was based on anything. It was just what we started as a conversation. We did a projection and came out that the NCA Evans Farm, if we were to start development today, as far as the planning, the zoning, the engineering, and the construction, by the time the end of 2024 came around, which would be about 4 years, we would have paid somewhere in the neighborhood of $200,000 in NCA charges to the city, not to Evans Farm, simply to the city. And those are all estimates, but as the time period is an estimate, so are the numbers. After that, the length of that, and the city's NCA extended a couple of years, which drove it up to about $400,000. At that point, we knew that we were kind of faced in a predicament here. We were either going to have to move forward with this, or we were going to have to hold off. And the family has about 1,000, 1,100 acres left, and we can grow from the south and the east and the west, and grow towards the center and then to the north. And by the time in about 8 or 9 years, we'll get to Peach Blow and we'll go north, and the city won't have any NCA money from us at all. And that was kind of what our predicament was. We've been working with Darren and with Tom, with trying to be completely straightforward with them. And we thought we came up with a reasonable offer of, in lieu of the $200,000 which we projected we would pay over by the end of 2024. We'd pay $250,000, and that extra $50,000 would address the extra estimated time, whatever that estimated time would be. And that's how we got to $250,000 by the end of 2024. 12.5 years ago, I started Evans Farm with the family, the Evans family. And shortly after I started there, with family, working with them, consulting with them, we approached the city with the plan. It was just a concept at first. Over the course of 4 or 5 years, we came back and met informally with city staff and with city officials with a plan. That plan, the family's vision has never changed, nor has really the plan changed that much. Maybe a street alignment here or a couple lots here, but it's still very much a new urbanism community. And with that, nothing's changed. So the piece north of Peach Blow is always intended as, this 43 acres, was always intended as single-family residential. It fit with the comprehensive plan with the city. It fit with the comprehensive plan for Berlin Township, frankly. So it worked pretty well. And while we didn't know all the details of the city's NCA, and Lisa, you enlightened me a little bit on all the standards. The Evans Farm is almost 1,200 acres, and our 10 mills for the NCA on that has been in effect for a couple years too. So we were advised by legal counsel we can't have 2 NCA fees, and 17.5 mills on that property would be unsellable in my opinion. So we opted to pursue or follow our legal counsel and our NCA board's council's opinion and stay with the 10 mills, and as some sort of a meeting in the middle ground, we offered the $250,000. I'm not sure at the end of 2024 we will have or would have incurred $250,000 worth of NCA fees at 7.5 mills, but have been somewhat close. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Drew, did you get your question answered?
Not
I didn't
entirely.
think
So, what made you petition to join the city for that small section versus keep it as just a consistent Evans Farm development?
We have no choice. It's in the service agreement with the city and county.
The map that's up here on the screen that is a result of the agreement the city and county reached on areas that the city services. And the agreement is explicit in saying that if the city elects not to serve the area, the city and county have to reach an agreement on how that service would be provided. One option, obviously, is the city could provide the service and it would have to waive its requirement that it be annexed into the city. So then you have a situation where it's being serviced by the city, by the county for sewer, or I mean by the city for sewer and water, but it's not, they're not in the city. But for all intents and purposes, they're next to, surrounded by the city. The residents won't distinguish the fact that they're living outside of the city, in my opinion. Now, for purposes of them calling up the city income tax department and saying, what's this 10 mil charge? The difference would be, we'd say, you're not in the city, you're in the township, you've got to complain there. Versus them calling us up if they're in the city, and we provide it saying, yes, that's the result of X, Y, and Z. This was an agreement the city reached, you pay 10 mils, that funds this project. So that's the same, it's kind of what we have to do now. But it's, I mean, it's, so anyway, that's, I mean, to Lisa's question about the resolution, and that was, those are good points, and I hadn't, you know, yeah.
I didn't
And
really think about it either until Terra Alta was on our
Right.
agenda, and then that
And-
made me remember that we did that regarding Terra
Well,
Alta.
there is one
It was-
difference, is that this is a pre-existing
Right.
NCA that we're not approving or really have anything to do with. It's there. The question is whether we want a piece of that NCA to be allowed in the city. So it is distinguishable from, just from the weird circumstances from pretty much any other NCA we're going to get. I would posit to you that the rest of our guidelines are basically untouched. They'll still have to, and they're just guidelines, but they'll still be there because this is a weird situation where there already is one. And the piece that's coming into the city is smaller, but as Mr. Ironman stated, that is a pretty big parcel that it's in there. So I'm less worried about that than the other, you know, valid points that you're making, but I don't think it messes with our guidelines necessarily, because we're not approving that NCA. That's why we're stuck with that regardless.
Right, but we don't have to approve the annexation if it doesn't fit in the guidelines. I mean, we set the guidelines because we didn't want to have NCAs that were 10 mils, because we knew that put
And
it at
really,
risk.
that's on new ones, not ones already existing, is what I keep thinking.
But it isn't existing in the city.
No,
It's existing, but it's not in the city.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Because
That's
we
the
knew that
difference.
that creates an issue for our taxpayers, and then they complain to us and ask us why they're paying it. And so that's
That
kind of.
doesn't go away, you're right.
It does, no, that doesn't go away.
So if we look at this strictly based on, does it make sense based on our comprehensive plan? I think it does. I think what complicates this is, first of all, the NCA issue. And if we approve this, I get Darren's point, this is an existing NCA versus a new one, but it would violate our established policy on NCAs. If we don't approve it, then they're going to have our city water and sewer, and we're not going to annex it, which then violates our policy on, that we've required everybody else to annex to the city to get our services. So it's complicated. I mean, it just, one way or the other, we're going to have to make an exception either to the water sewer policy and annexation, or we're going to have to make an exception to the NCA policy. if
Why are we the only ones making exceptions, though? That's the part that I'm struggling with.
Well, because we've already got established policy that you have to annex if you want our services, and we've already got an established policy regarding NCAs. So if we don't annex it, we have to make an exception to that annexation
Are
policy.
you saying every
chime in?
farms go down to 7.5?
Right.
Can I chime in on
You
the?
certainly can.
Okay, so code doesn't strictly say you have to be in the city or that you even have to annex to get our services. It says you have to petition for annexation, which is what they're doing. If you choose not to annex them, we can still serve them. You're not violating code as it is written. It also does state that you may choose to waive their need to be annexed and be on our utilities should the need be there. So we're
So
still
we have-
fitting into all.
Yeah, it's just, yeah, we have, yes. Technically, Blake is correct, but it would be another one of those just exceptional set of circumstances that, we would normally not do this. In the only circumstances you would consider doing it would be something like this. But then you still have, you're providing the water and sewer service, but you're not getting any, that's all.
Income tax.
So I guess that's the first time, I was always under the assumption that it was a requirement.
Well, it's a
That's why-
requirement that you file for annexation. I guess Blake's point is they did their filing, and you could say, thanks, but no thanks.
And there's been very few situations where
happened,
we've
but-
turned down an
Right,
annexation because.
I'm not saying it's the go-to, it
No.
is an extreme,
Right.
yes.
But I guess I would throw out there, not to complicate matters further, that you may want to think carefully about making that decision, because when we talk about precedent, there are probably lots of folks who would love to use our services and not have to annex. There's properties that are outside the city that might want to have a big thing we don't like, but they don't want to annex it, and they might want our services. So that might be a more dangerous precedent to set as well. So it's not easy, sorry. Sorry to throw more stuff.
No,
out
I
there.
mean, it's, all this is good information.
Council, I can't think of at least a contemporary annexation where we haven't, where we've been contiguous, which we are in this case, and we haven't required that annexation. In part, that helps us to implement a lot of elements of the comprehensive plan by requiring that annexation and making developments come through development process, but also various other processes that you're well aware of. I think only in certain very limited circumstances have we maybe in the long ago past provided service, but it tends to be when we're not contiguous to something or it's just totally pre-existing any of these kinds of agreements. Is that fair, Blake?
Mhm.
And we are out of time after tonight. This is, by the statute, it's.
And Justin, based on when I was doing some research, not looking at your notes specifically, but looking at some other stuff, it was like as of June of 2017, looked like there was about a $8.7 million yet to be collected from the South NCA.
Thanks, Councilman. Just so you know, over the last couple of weeks, I've been working on some financial forecasts for this NCA, the fund that financed the Glen Parkway expansion. The debt for that expansion is maturing in 2028. We have the option to call the debt in 2024. 2 weeks ago, I gave Tom 3 variations of a forecast. If development increases by about 25% a year, you could probably reduce the millage down considerably going into, I believe, 2024, 2025. If development is kind of stagnant, you could reduce the millage marginally in 2027. And then if there's like a 10% increase, you could marginally reduce the millage each year going into 2026. There's about I believe about a $1.3 million cash balance in that fund. So the thought would be draw down that cash balance, apply it towards the principal and interest on the debt, and then, again, reduce the millage for the residents in that area.
And regardless of who pays the NCA charges, it's just, I mean, the next hole that's dug and sold, that person is now on that NCA roster and paying into that. So it isn't like if we forego his $200,000, $250,000, that money's still coming in. It's just not coming in from him. It's coming in from whoever else is building that next hole.
It would be coming in from all the residents who are already there paying.
Well, yes,
paying
and
every year.
that also, absolutely. I'm saying the incremental increase. When you're looking at his proposed $250,000 payment, you're saying, oh, well, if we don't take this, we're not going to have that $250,000. You're right, you wouldn't, but you're going to get it from this new house and this new house and this new house and this new house and.
But not in that area.
Not
on my 45 acres.
No, not on his
Okay,
45
okay.
acres, I'm saying in the south.
Oh, yeah,
NCA.
sure, there's plenty of, there's
Yeah,
additional.
so it isn't like,
No, it's not like.
you're gonna forego
No.
$250,000 if we don't take that. It's just a different revenue stream is all it is.
Theoretically, the pay down is that much, I guess, a little longer maybe, because you don't have those
Maybe.
loans, but that's
Okay.
speculation.
Yep.
Madam Mayor, this is a complicated issue. Everybody's points are valid. I'm just going to call the vote, and after we come down, this thing we come down on. I'll move for the approval of ordinance 19-63.
I
Second.
have a motion by Mr. Schaefer, second by Mr. Jones. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
No.
Mr. Hoffman?
I have to recuse from this vote.
Mr. Farrell?
No.
Mr. Hellinger?
No.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
So I believe that's 3-3, correct?
Yes.
So I did research this earlier. To pass, it requires 4 votes. To pass, a tie is basically not a pass. Just for everyone's benefit, and I'll reiterate it because the applicant is here. Basically, this means it's rejected, but it does not preclude him from refiling and starting the process over again. That's in the Ohio Revised Code. That nothing stops him from doing that again. So we might see this again sometime. That's totally up to the applicant.
Thanks.
Moving on to item 9 is the third reading of ordinance number 20-05.
Ordinance number 20-05, an ordinance amending section 901 of the City of Delaware codified ordinances to bring the rules and regulations into conformance with the current right-of-way best management practices.
That would be me, Madam Mayor.
I'm screaming. You have no idea why. You go
Break the
ahead.
silence. I have really very little to add from the last presentation. If you recall, the AEP did testify and wanted a minor change into the definition of what constitutes an emergency. We did include that, and for reference, if their restoration of electric service during a major storm requires them to be out in the right-of-way, we're not going to slow the process down, require them to submit an application and plans. Just so happens, last Friday, we had a very similar situation where a power line came down Central Avenue, and we had to close Central Avenue, and AEP showed up and did what they had to do. We showed up, closed the road, did traffic control, worked well together, as I predicted we always have and always will. But nevertheless, we've added that technical language in there to make them comfortable with that. I did reach out and provide that language, have not heard back from them. That's the only change we made. The other changes, the other utilities that provided comment were not specifically regarding the language in the maintenance of traffic section, or mostly questions on how we would enforce the policy. So with that, I would recommend approval tonight unless there's additional questions.
Questions by council? Is there a motion?
Motion to approve ordinance 20-05. Second.
Motion by Mr. Jones, second by Mr. Schaefer. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Farrell?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Item 10 is the third reading of ordinance number 20-06. Please read this into the record.
Ordinance number 20-06, an ordinance revising section 909 of the City of Delaware Code of Ordinances establishing general rules and regulations for the maintenance and repair of sidewalk within public right-of-way.
Mr. Brandon?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, members of council, we're just recommending tabling this item, pending some additional research regarding specifically the ADAG regulations concerning vertical tripping hazards that we had a little bit of discussion on last time, and how that impacts accessible routes within our public right-of-way, so we can report back a little more thoroughly.
Do we want to table this to a date?
We had tabled it indefinitely. I just need to, we can bring it back and we can put it
Yeah,
back.
let's do it definitely.
The other thing to mention is that the other 2 resolutions of service, resolutions of necessity before you tonight, we would be administering that program with the current plan. So there was some, so anyway. So we're recommending a tabling it indefinitely.
I will move to table ordinance 20-06 indefinitely. Second.
A motion by Mr. Schaefer, a second by Mr. Jones. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Farrell?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes. And if you'll read item 11, which is the second reading of resolution 2020.
Resolution number 20-20, a resolution of necessity for construction or repair of sidewalks for the 2020 downtown sidewalk maintenance program.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Again, little to add from the last. As Tom mentioned, we'll enforce this under the existing sidewalk regulations. And upon it, we'll recommend approval tonight, and notifications will go out later this week and early next week to the property owners regarding the program.
Thank you. Any questions for Bill? Any motions?
Move for approval of, to suspend the rules. Move to suspend the
No.
Resolution.
Resolution.
Yeah. I'll move for approval. Resolution 2020.
Second.
I have a motion from Mr. Farrell, a second by Mr. Schaefer. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Farrell?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes. Motion carries. Item 12 is second reading of Resolution 20-21.
Resolution number 20-21, a resolution of necessity for construction or repair of sidewalks for the 2020 Sidewalk Maintenance Program.
And again, last one, Madam Mayor. This is for sidewalks outside the downtown proper, largely in areas where we paved roads last year. Again, the current standards will be enforced, not potentially new standards. And the additional document looks like this. I'll put it at everyone's council seat. This is just the final property owner list that does replace the draft list which was in the original package. This is based on going back out and making sure of all the work and updating this list. So again, properties on this list are the ones that will receive notifications later this week and into next week. And without any questions, we recommend approval of this tonight as well.
And just real quickly, Councilman Hoffman had a question at the previous meeting regarding the interest rate. We are getting that confirmed with the auditor.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. I expect to get feedback tomorrow, and I'll send an email out to City Council as to what those rates are that are charged by the county auditor for real estate collections.
Is this the first time around on these addresses, or is
No,
this?
this is basically just an update to the information
Okay.
you already have
Okay.
based on going out in the field. And this list was put together mostly in the late fall, and then this list was this is the same list but refined with our inspections this week.
And Bill, some of these were part of the Safe Walk program?
Well,
For the early part?
Yes. I mean, originally?
Yeah.
Yes, this area was already looked at in the safe walks. The entire city was looked at.
Right.
With the exception of East William Street. And so this is going back into the area again, as we mentioned, going back for two reasons. One, we've had a complaint in the area, so we investigate it. Or two, we've gone ahead and invested funding to repave a road, and then we're going back in there the following year and looking at sidewalks, streetlights, signs, and things like that, and getting the infrastructure up to date. And that's what's going to key off our Safe Walks annual program each year from this point forward, is doing it in conjunction with our resurfacing program.
Any questions, Mr. Farina? Any motions on Resolution 20-21?
Motion approved, resolution 2021.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Jones, second by Mr. Schaefer. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman?
No.
Mr. Farrell?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes. Item 13 is consideration of Resolution 20-25.
Resolution number 20-25, a resolution indicating what services the City of Delaware will provide to 1.062 plus or minus acres of land, more or less, description and map are attached here too for the annexation known as the Alice Shaw Enterprises LLC annexation by Michael R. Shade, agent for the petitioners.
Mr. Efron?
Madam Mayor, members of council, this is for the former Obie's property at the corner of Hills Miller and US 23. It is approximately an acre. We've been talking with Mr. Shade and his clients about potential development on this site. It's not a very big piece. It's on the corner with a lot of transportation elements that have to be accounted for. We know this from our recent past with Speedway and just our regular development process. And so there's a very limited carrying capacity of what this parcel could accommodate. The things we've been talking about to date, and we have some meetings coming up in the future on this property, I guess pending on your action here tonight, are a potential drive-through restaurant of some kind. It would be, again, be very small on this piece and would have to accommodate the access management requirements in the area. In terms of being able to service the property with all of our city services, we can accommodate that according to the other department heads that have chimed in during the discussion of this resolution internally in terms of water, sewer, police, and fire, which are the primary ones, as well as refuse and all of our normal services. This applicant should be advised that they would have to extend any lines or make any improvements required at their expense. And I think important to note, this is not in a new community authority area. So that is not a subject of this particular discussion. Other than that, staff would recommend approval of the resolution of services, which, as you know, you may not know, a couple of you, but it's the first step in the Ohio Revised Code process for annexations of a Type 2 variety. This really starts the process. It'll go back to the county, then it sits for a while, and then it comes back to us for a period of time for us to make a decision, just like the previous case this evening. Our proposed process with the applicant would be what we've recommended before, that in the intervening period of months, we would work with the applicant to bring forward a development plan and a potential zoning so that if the timing all works out, and I know it doesn't always do that, but if the timing all works out, we would have the annexation of zoning and development plan on your agenda at the appointed hour at the end of this process, or pretty close to it, so you at least know what the proposal is. Staff recommends approval. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Quick question, Dave. I'm just looking through your notes. Originally, there were underground gas tanks on that property. Were those removed yet?
I'll let Mike address that as the applicant. I believe they have been, but part of this process, part of this process would be to ensure that all of those things have been removed.
Michael Shade, attorney law, 236 West Central Avenue, Delaware. It is my understanding the tanks have been removed. I don't know if a clearance letter has been issued from the state, but we will certainly ascertain that. The process, this property is surrounded on 3 sides by the city of Delaware. It's kind of a hole in the metric right now, and my client my client is going to actually be the builder for this project, and will, he may not do the work, but I mean, he's going to, at his nickel, build the project, and that will be a long-term lease arrangement. This has been, as many people have commented, somewhat of an eyesore. And it needs to be taken care of. It is awkward, as Dave said, that it's a small piece, and it does have some traffic issues. They have worked diligently to try and work with Speedway at the insistence of staff early on in the process. I think it was our first or second meeting. They asked us to go back to Speedway, and Speedway would not entertain any discussions. At that point in time, though, Speedway had built it. They had also, in fairness to them, they had gone into food business. That means that you're letting somebody that's going to be a competition for you. So I'm not going to be critical of that. I think that the project, through the diligent work of council on Speedway, brought what I consider to be a wonderful project. I go by there almost every weekend, and it's very, very busy, and it flows very well. As Dave has indicated, this is the first step in the process. we are already set with, if you approve this tonight, this is set for approval by the commissioners on the 30th of the month. That is one of the contractual terms we have, is that it has to be with their approval, not your adoption, but just with the approval by the end of March. And that's why we were under some time guns, and Elaine was just wonderful to work with in getting this done, because I was feeding this stuff to her at the, kind of at the last minute, because all surveyors are busier than the mayor knows that more than most of you, but it was really bad here. We were told we were going to have it in a week, it was 3 weeks later, so. But after this takes place, assuming that it would be, if you approve this tonight, it will go to, on the 30th, then when sometime the end of that week, it will be transmitted back to you, and then it has to sit for 60 days. Nobody can take any action on it. And what the goal is to start through the processes that Dave outlined. And that's where we are.
Thank you. Any questions for Dave or the applicant? Ms. Shea? Any motions?
I would move to approve Resolution 20-25.
Second.
Got the stereo over here. Motion by Mrs. Keller. I don't know who said it. Y'all said it.
Chris.
Chris, okay, Mr. Jones. Second by Mr. Jones. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Farrell?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes. Thank you.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Good luck. Item 14 and 15 and 16 and 17. Start reading.
Ordinance number 20-10, an ordinance approving a rezoning amendment for Terra Alta LLC for Terra Alta subdivision from A1 and R2 PMU to A1 and R2 PMU on approximately 472.9 acres and located north of Bromiller Road, east of Pollock Road, and west of Berlin Station Road. There's no zoning changes to the Stockdale Farms portion of the development. Ordinance number 20-11, an ordinance approving a conditional use permit for Terra Alta LLC, allowing the placement of a planned mixed-use overlay district, PMU, for Terra Alta subdivision on approximately 472.9 acres zoned A1 and R2 PMU and located north of Bromiller Road, east of Pollock Road, and west of Berlin Station Road. Ordinance number 20-12, an ordinance approving an amended preliminary development plan for Terra Alta LLC for Terra Alta subdivision on approximately 472.9 acres on property zoned A1 and R2 PMU and located north of Bromiller Road, east of Pollock Road, and west of Berlin Station Road. And ordinance number 20-13, an ordinance approving an amended preliminary subdivision plat for Terra Alta LLC for Terra Alta subdivision on approximately 472.9 acres on property zoned A1 and R2 PMU and located north of Bromiller Road, east of Pollock Road, and west of Berlin Station Road.
Thank you. And a couple of these are set for public hearings for March 23rd, so we'll just go into them at that point. Okay? Move on to item 18, which is consideration of ordinance number 20-14.
Ordinance number 20-14, an ordinance approving a combined preliminary and final development plan for Skilkin Gold Real Estate Development for Sheets located at 700 Sunbury Road on property zone B3, Community Business District, and B4, General Business District, on approximately 4.6 acres.
It was the recommendation to go to another reading?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, members of council, we've given the agenda tonight and also what we talked about at Planning Commission with the applicant and some members of the public. We indicated we'd be presenting this and the applicant will be back at your next meeting here.
Yes. Okay, we'll move on to item 19 and 20 and 21. Sorry, Lane.
Ordinance number 20-15, an ordinance approving a final development plan request by Pulte Homes for the communities at Glen Ross, Section 16, containing 45 single-family lots on 18.21 acres on property zoned R2 PMU, one-family residential district with a planned mixed-use overlay district, and located on Canby Drive, Bald Eagle Drive, and Sundial Lane. An ordinance number 20-16, an ordinance approving a final subdivision plat request by Pulte Homes for the communities at Glen Ross, Section 16, Part 1, containing 36 single-family lots on 14.476 acres on property zoned R2 PMU, one-family residential district with a planned mixed-use overlay district, and located on Canby Drive, Bald Eagle Drive, and Sundial Lane. And ordinance number 20-17, an ordinance approving a final subdivision plat request by Pulte Homes for the communities at Glen Ross, Section 16, Part 2, containing 9 single-family lots on 3.743 acres on property zoned R2 PMU, one-family residential district with a planned mixed-use overlay district, and located on Bald Eagle Drive and Sundial Lane. Mr. Upland?
Madam Mayor, members of council, we're on our 16th section of Communities of Glen Ross, obviously a big development. This is for the final development plan and final subdivision plat for this section. The section is located south of Cheshire Road. It is, all of Communities of Glen Ross is covered by a planned mixed-use overlay with a specific preliminary development plan and a specific zoning text. It's tabletop farmland, as you can see from the aerial, should we need to refer to it. Just to give you a little larger context, we have Section 15, Section 11, Section 12. Section 13 here was referenced in the staff report, and Section 16, which is the subject cases. Section 13 was referenced because Section 13 actually has to be constructed before Section 16, or some stormwater improvements have to occur in advance of Section 16 being developed. So the applicant has the ability to make that choice, whether they want to advance Section 13 to get to 16, or whether they want to put in the stormwater management requirements that would allow them to move forward with 16. They can't move forward with 16 without your approval on these items, regardless, and so that's why they seek that. It's basically the next major piece of Winterbourne Drive, which progresses to the south and would go through the Gurdon development as well. In terms of this particular development, I think this site plan was contained within your packet. It does include 45 single-family dwelling units, each on their own lot, quite a bit of room reserved along the unloaded Winterbourne Drive. And there is a pocket park amenity of a little under an acre in this location, which would include some tot lot amenities, some benches, and then we also work with the applicant. One of the requirements you'll note in here is to shift some of these improvements over here and create some field space, which our subdivisions tend to need, and there's room here to do all of that on that piece, and they've been accommodating and willing to do that pending your, obviously your favorable outcome on these lots. Your planning commission did recommend unanimous approval, as do we as staff, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Questions by council? Okay. Motions? If no questions?
I do need to let everyone know I need to abstain from this. Pulte is a customer of mine.
Okay.
Move to suspend the rules requiring 3 readings on ordinance 20-15.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Keller, second by Mr. Schaefer. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Abstain.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Farrell?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
Move for approval of ordinance 20-15.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Keller, second by Mr. Schaefer. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Abstain.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Farrell?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes. Motion carries.
Move to suspend the rules on ordinance 20-16.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Keller, second by Mr. Schaefer. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Abstain.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Farrell?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
Move for approval of 20-16.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Keller, second by Mr. Schaefer. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Abstain.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Farrell?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
Move for approval of, or, sorry, move to suspend the rules for ordinance 20-17.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Keller, second by Mr. Schaefer. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Abstain.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Farrell?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
Now I move for approval of 20-17.
Motion by Mrs. Keller, second by Mr. Schaefer. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Abstain.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Farrell?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes. Motion carries. Item 22 and 23 can be read in.
Ordinance number 20-18, an ordinance approving a final development plan request by TNR Properties for the enclave at the Ravines at Olentangy containing 86 single-family attached units and one single-family detached unit on approximately 14.742 acres on property zoned R6 PMU, multifamily residential district with a planned mixed-use overlay district and located on the north side of Cove Road and west of Rockdale Run. An ordinance number 20-19, an ordinance approving a final subdivision plat request by TNR Properties for the enclave at the Ravines at Olentangy containing 86 single-family attached units and one single-family detached unit on approximately 14.742 acres on property zoned R6 PMU, multifamily residential district with a planned mixed-use overlay district, and located on the north side of Cove Road and west of Rockdale Run.
Thank you, Ms. Jefflin.
Madam Mayor, members of council, this is the final development plan, final plat for what you recently approved in preliminary format, which will look and feel a lot like the enclaves at Adelaide off of Houck Road in terms of its layout, its design, and its final product. It is a part of the larger development in this case, which does have a planned mixed-use overlay for the Ravines at Olentangy, which would include this area, some duplex units to the east, and some single-family for the balance of the development. This is the overall zoning map. It did include originally a POI area. Again, all this is included in an overlay, which was to be some senior housing. Developer subsequently removed that portion of the development, which makes some sense given where it is physically on the site. And then the last sub-area is some industrial on the north side of the stream that's really separated physically by a large stream barrier. So this is the area we're talking about in question. It is farmland. And the layout is, as you saw in the preliminary, for approximately 86 units. They are attached units with the exception of this particular one, which is not attached. It's just the way the math worked out on this site in that particular area. But again, they will look and feel like the enclaves at Adelaide. This is the final development plan. These would be all private streets internally. Rockdale Run is a public street, and some of these units do have driveways and face the public street. Most of the units are internally facing. Along Cove Road, there will be an extension of required mounding and landscaping, and this site plan can accommodate that in accordance with our regulations, but also working with our colleagues in engineering at the county who are contemplating a future roundabout at this location off Cove Road. As I say, the units, and this is just an example, obviously, but will be attached single-family units, each on their own lot. Your planning commission does recommend approval, as do we as staff. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
So, Dave, I brought this up to Tom when I talked to him earlier this morning. Those are private streets, 24-foot wide, It says, no parking will be allowed, which makes sense for fire apparatus and stuff to get back in there. Being private streets, who's enforcing that?
Well, the fire department and us can enforce the no parking with respect to these development plans, and they conduct inspections, and they do that sort of thing on all kinds of private sites, maybe more than you might even realize that they do. So that can be done as a day-to-day matter. It'll be the residents and signage out there that we normally require on these final development plans. And another thing I'd just point out with respect to that is that just like in Enclaves at LA, we've dispersed some visitor parking areas around this site as well. So there are some additional off-site areas. These do include garages, and they do include driveways where you still can park without hanging over sidewalk. There's only sidewalk on one side of the street again, just like Enclaves at Adelaide.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
There is a notice regarding the landfill that was added on item 14 is an additional, there's a condition regarding units that are constructed within 1,000 feet, I believe, right, Bill?
That's correct, and the developers agreed to it.
That had come up before in other parts of this development.
So when that's attached to the deed, when do the buyers find out about that? Not till closing, or are they given that ahead of time?
It'd be in their commitment that they're supposed to receive 15 days after they go into contract.
I knew you'd know
From
the
the title
answer.
company.
Okay.
That's good.
You know, that might be useful. Any other questions? What is the wish of council?
I move to suspend the rules on requiring 3 readings on ordinance 20-18. Second.
Motion by Mr. Schaefer, second by Mr. Jones. Hello. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Farrell?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
Move for the approval of ordinance 20-18.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Schaefer, second by Mr. Jones. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Farrell?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
I move to suspend the rules requiring 3 readings on ordinance 20-19.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Schaefer, second by Mr. Jones. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Farrell?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
Move for the approval of ordinance 20-19.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Schaefer, second by Mr. Jones. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Farrell?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes, motion carries. Item 24 is consideration of ordinance number 20-20.
Ordinance number 20-20, an ordinance providing for the issuance and sale of notes in the maximum principal amount of $2 million in anticipation of the issuance and bonds for the purpose of paying the cost of constructing Glen Road between certain termini by constructing, excavating, grading, and paving, installing drainage, sanitary sewer laterals, street lighting, conduits, curb and gutters, signage, traffic pavement markings, street signs, landscaping, and acquiring interest in real estate together with all necessary appurtenances thereto.
Mr. Navi?
Thanks, Mayor, council members. For the 2020 budget and the capital improvement plan, there's a planned expansion of Glen Parkway all the way up to Berlin Station at a cost of roughly $4.3 million. As a part of that, the project itself would be financed from a residential TIF, the Glen Road TIF. And to accommodate this construction this year, we need to borrow $2 million in short-term borrowing. The thought would be we could roll this note 1 year over the next and then just use the TIF proceeds to pay down principal until it's paid off.
Again, this is, I guess, an example of how growth does help pay for itself, because this is not impacting the general fund at all. This was a residential TIF that City Council put in place over 10 years ago. Obviously, with the initial contemplation was a bridge over the railroad track. That wasn't feasible, so we reallocated. We got council to authorize the reallocation of some of those funds for this project. And I'm working with with Justin, taking a look at what the projections might be to see if we could do what we originally intended, which was to either go under or over that railroad track, just given the growth down in that area. But this is an example of where those tools that City Council put in place are helping us extend a piece of infrastructure north, which is important from a transportation standpoint. And Bill, you can, I mean, ultimately someday the project is to go north all the way up to 3637. The county has agreed to take Glen Parkway. Are we calling it Glen at that point, Bill? North of 3637?
North 36, we're renamed it to Bixby Parkway, which would go up to 521, 42, and eventually over to 23.
That's longer term.
Yes.
To 23. So we're recommending, we can adopt this tonight or go to another reading.
Thanks, Tom. I traditionally haven't asked for waivers. I will say the 10-year Treasury yield is at an all-time low, so if council would consider maybe waiving readings, but there's no need to pass it on an emergency clause. We could probably save some money on the interest alone.
Move to suspend the rules requiring 3 readings on 20-20.
We're saving money.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Keller, second by Mr. Hoffman. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Farrell?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
Move for the approval of ordinance 20-20.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Keller, second by Mr. Hoffman. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Farrell?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
Justin said the magic words I said.
I know, just to say, now you've learned how to get something passed. And item 25 is an update and discussion on the 2024 capital improvement program.
Really, this is, council may recall discussion during the adoption of both the budget and the capital improvement program that we indicated we would be coming back at some point at the beginning of the year to make some updates of projects that were discussed by city council but weren't included in the CIP, as well as adjustments to other projects for other reasons. And we've included in your packet a note that Alicia Ballone put together that just kind of outlines the various supplementals that follow this particular resolution. So, Alicia, if you want to just elaborate.
Sure. So the part Justin will be talking to you about the actual supplementals themselves, but one of the things that's included in your packet is just an update of what the CIP looks like with the updated revenue projections, so you can see the impact that all of these supplementals would have on just our balance in general in these various funds.
And really what we've, so obviously there's a number that follow from here. The East William Street project, which Bill can talk about, and the Glen Parkway project, and there are a couple of parks projects that are in there as well. So we're prepared to talk about those.
Yes, and the only other one that we probably want to mention in the CIP review is that the Bruce Road, that road path that we've all heard about, that one is, it's in here, the information package is in there as well. You'll see that one coming, but they're still working on putting together a final cost estimate.
We didn't want to bring that before you. We're still in negotiations regarding acquiring the rights, the easement. So once we have that, we can bring that back to you.
Right, but it's in the works, just to keep you updated.
So if you like, we can go into more detail when we discuss each of the different supplementals. The first one is the housing program income fund. These were dollars that the city had loaned as part of the project. The house sold where the loan was made, and that money came back to the city. It has to be reprogrammed as income, and I can let Dave elaborate. George, I did indicate your question about whether we could set up our own little program fund, and Dave indicated that might not be feasible.
Yeah, with these funds, it isn't. We're on the hunt for that. If there are funds, first of all, it's only $8,000, so can't do much with that. But more particularly, two things. The state is requiring a program income to be spent right away for qualifying purposes so that we don't have program income. We spent some time drawing down. We had high balances before, as did many places. But the other complication here is that these are home funds, and so they can only be used for certain purposes. In the case of our community, as a practical matter, it really is tenant-based rental assistance through the Housing Authority or with Habitat. We've been talking to Habitat about this. $8,000 really isn't enough for TBRA rental assistance. And so it made sense to move forward with Habitat, who will create an affordable unit in part with these funds.
So that's the first, and that, again, that can just be, all of these can be first readings, these supplementals, so that's the background on that one. The East William Street, I'll let Bill just discuss that. That was discussed in connection with his budget presentation and subsequent CIP.
Sure, and the request on the East William Street of the additional $300,000 is for, it breaks down $100,000 for additional project engineering, which is inspection, to pay for our field inspection program out there and the firms we're using. Then $200,000 of that represents 4% contingency for the remainder of the project. We didn't have assigned contingency on this project when we started it. We're towards the, I want to say, the latter third of the project now at this point, with anticipated completion in June, July. And we have no contingency. We're through a lot of the funding too, so now is when contingency really becomes important into the project. And so we're adding the contingency in there to make sure that we can keep the project moving should something unanticipated come up over the next 3 or 4 months. If we don't, obviously, spend the contingency, that money will become available again. But that gets us to a comfortable number to be able to finish the project up.
And there's another $100,000 in there for stormwater improvements. Do you want to just?
Yeah, then there's $100,000 for storm nets to cover some costs we ran into regarding interference issues between the storm sewer and existing sanitary lateral connections down along, specifically on the north side of the road. And that will cover the cost of making appropriate repairs to the property owners for those interferences. And those were things, again, underground that we couldn't see until we actually started digging up and putting the storm in. We realized there were some issues there. And we've been effectively making those repairs as we've gone along and keeping all properties in service as we go along.
The Glen Parkway project, Bill, you can.
Sure, that's just, really, that's the $636,000. That's just, we didn't put it in. We could have during the 2020 appropriations discussions in the budget. We didn't put it in. This one's known quantity in terms of the cost of the water main extension with the Glen Parkway project. So we're putting it in at this point. It could have been, we could have dealt with it in November, December, but we're doing it now, and it will be coming from Water Fund, which has sufficient balance in order to cover this cost. This will extend the water line up to Berlin Station Road along with the roadway construction.
And Ted, you want to just kind of review these park?
So two of the projects we're looking at is one is the Ross Street Park. Looking at, we did a lot of community outreach last fall and came up with the master plan and found a plan to move forward with on that park. We've had that money allocated in that park project, but now we have a plan in place and we want to move forward with phase 1 of that, which includes the parking lot design, the building demolition, and some cleanup of the site, really. Some landscaping and that part. And all those will work in partnership with SWCI on the site and continuing to move forward. But we got a lot of good public response, and we're ready to move forward out there.
When you say building demolition, you mean one of the buildings behind SWCI?
Yeah, I don't have it. The single building, that's the bigger of the larger building, that's
Okay.
behind there. Because SWCI still wants to utilize the smaller building
Right, okay, that's what I
as
thought.
one of their labs.
Right.
Okay.
This was, right.
Yeah, so our plan still supports that. But again, a lot of the community input was they wanted to see some more some field space and some trails, connected with the trails that are there. So.
Yeah, well, this is kind of phase 1 of those
Yes.
improvements.
Mhm.
And again, as Ted pointed out, this money had been appropriated in prior years for some reason, oversight on our part. the 100,000 didn't get put into the 2020 CIP, so.
And now that our Parks Department is out of that area, we're ready to move forward with those improvements on the whole block of the park.
And you want to discuss the
The
feasibility
green,
study?
yeah, the Delaware Run. So just recently, we've again been in contact with CSX to move forward on studying a portion of the Delaware Run Trail, and that's from Blue Limestone Park through the golf course and potentially connecting to Grady. And part of that study, we have to deal with the railroad, and that was so reaching out and getting contacts with them. And that process involves us doing a feasibility study to utilize a railroad tunnel that goes under Blue Limestone Park now. That feasibility study will then be reviewed by CSX. And those two costs are included in there. I think the feasibility study is about 15 and the CSX review is about 14. So once we get past that point, we'll have some direction on how we can move forward with that project.
For us to even consider the feasibility of this project, whether it's a limited scope and it only goes to the Grady property or just to our golf course, we have to figure out whether we can get through that railroad, so that tunnel. And that's what is before you tonight. This is not committing you to anything beyond that. And I know there's been discussion before about some of the concerns raised and regarding the project, longer term going all the way out to Hug Road, but this is not part of that. This is just the feasibility of the first piece.
Right.
So anyway, that's a first reading tonight. All of these are first readings tonight, so.
Any questions on any of those?
I love the Greenway idea. I'd love to see it happen. Put that out there.
Thank you. Thanks, Ted and Bill. City managers report.
Mayor, did you want me to read them?
Oh, yeah, they probably should be.
You can jump on it.
We just right, yeah, for the record.
I've done enough reading tonight.
No, go ahead. Let's start with 25. Or 26.
26. Ordinance number 20-21, an ordinance supplementing the 2020 appropriations ordinance to provide additional funding for the Housing Program Income Fund. And ordinance number 20-22, an ordinance supplementing the 2020 appropriations ordinance to provide additional funding for the East William Street project and declaring an emergency clause. That this ordinance is hereby declared to be an emergency measure necessary to provide for the public peace, safety, health, and welfare of the city, and for the further reason to provide for the sufficient level of appropriations to complete the roadway improvements for East William Street, and as such will be in full force and effect immediately upon its passage. And ordinance number 20-23, an ordinance supplementing the 2020 appropriations ordinance to provide additional funding for water main extensions associated with the Glen Parkway project. And ordinance number 20-24, an ordinance supplementing the 2020 appropriations ordinance to provide additional funding for parkland and trailway development improvements.
Thanks. Okay, item 30 is city manager's report.
You heard earlier regarding the Health Department's presentation tomorrow. The Health Commissioner will be here. She'll be giving an update to the senior staff here regarding preparations that they're making, the protocol they're making. We do have a continuity of operations plan that contemplates disruption in service and things like that. Obviously, this is if something were to occur in terms of an outbreak here, that would be in the hands of the Health Department. So we would have to coordinate with them, but that's what we'll be discussing tomorrow. I'll provide City Council with an update later in the week as to the just kind of that briefing and how it could impact the city. I mean, obviously, as Councilwoman Keller pointed out, we want to be prepared for a scenario if it were to occur. We don't want it to occur, but we do need to prepare for it. So we'll be learning more about that tomorrow, and I'll get information out to Council towards the end of the week. We have a MORPC meeting on Thursday, and on a personnel note, Doug Richmond, who is our arborist, is now our code enforcement officer. He has taken the position that was left vacant when Susie Martin took a position with Union County. So Doug is still responding to, I don't know if he's still responding to issues regarding the trees, but,
Yeah, he is.
but we do have that position For Shade Tree Commission members here, I see that Mr. Wolver is in the audience. That position is posted. We understand the importance of it, and it's out for recruitment as we speak. We have a new person in our Economic Development Department, and Courtney Hendershot is her name, and I think we provided council some information about this a month or so ago, but we will have her come to a city council meeting here in the near future to meet all of you. And that's what I've got.
Okay, thank you. Council comments. Mr. Jones?
I'm good to go, thank you.
Okay. Mrs. Keller? I'm all good. Mr. Hoffman?
No comments.
Mr. Farrell?
Nothing.
Mr. Helmy?
Not gonna ruin the street.
Me either.
I am.
Oh, sure.
Wednesday morning, I'm going to do the Meals and Wheels for elected officials. On Thursday, I do have a meeting for a downtown study group, looking at a SID possibly. And then that night, there's the annual meeting for the Delaware Health Department. So I am doing some things. And with that, and I'm sorry I missed the last meeting. I was in Florida and it was cold, so there you go. I will look for motion to adjourn. We are adjourned at 8:45.
Let's go.
So,